Hello and welcome to Football and Grits. Brody, we got a lot to talk about on this show.
It's the upset episode.
I don't know that I physically yawned as we were talking about this week's schedule last week, but I was yawning in spirit, Brody.
Yes.
I was. My heart was yawning if my mouth was not also yawning. And yet, here we are. We're sitting here, and pretty much every real game did not end up like we thought it would. I think obviously the biggest shocker, we'll start there in a second. South Carolina just takes a flamethrower to both Tennessee's defense, Tennessee's playoff bid, Hendon Hooker's Heisman bid. We'll get into. I'm not going to call that a season-ruining loss for reasons that we'll get to.
No. Yeah, we can get into that.
And then on the flip side, of course,
it is a season ruiner in the literal sense that pretty much ended, all the massive hopes they had.
We got to break up the Vanderbilt Commodores, who are out here just wrecking shop, knocking off Florida. And then, Brady, people were sleeping on this one, but if you didn't pay attention or you just looked at the final score, I believe Ole Miss was losing to Arkansas 42-3 at one point.
Yeah. And considering how often we get our picks wrong every week, let's just highlight who had Arkansas plus 2.5 there.
I believe it was you, Brody. I believe
it was
you were the hog believer. I sold all my Arkansas stock like a month ago, so I was not allowed to pick Arkansas. We won't talk about my pick, Brody.
No, God no.
To be fair, if you flip like 6 or 7 of those touchdowns in Columbia, I'm right there. Right there. So
it's really just.
I mean, it's a game of inches, Brody. It's a game of inches. So we got to start in Columbia because I think I'm a Tennessee offense respecter, like many people, and I would say until it was 18 points there in the fourth quarter, I was kind of waiting for Tennessee to hit the Jets and everybody's got a game like this. This is a real kind of win your clunkers situation. South Carolina is a competent team, a good team. But Tennessee, the defense is playing disastrous, but they only need, 1 to 3 stops in the second half, and then they'll get there. But when you only put 14 points on the board in the second half, Brody, like Tennessee did, and the defense has this disastrous showing as we've seen. I believe the encyclopedic Matt Brown offered up that this was the first time that a top 5 AP team has given up 63 points to a non-ranked team. That's hard to do.
And it's even harder to wrap your head around when it hasn't even been a good South Carolina offense. Like they made history, and the South Carolina offense has not been very good. They're not bad or anything, but they're kind of like game management. I mean, even if you look at their good wins this year, right? It's like 24 on Kentucky. I think, but like 30 on A&M. But most of the time they're kind of a struggling offense. So it's kind of just bizarre that for one night Spencer Rattler was back to being like preseason number 1 pick in 2021, Spencer Rattler.
5-star, baby.
Yeah, right. And he was just humming. And I think, we're going to get to South Carolina in a minute because we want to dive into just the credit they deserve. But when I react to that game, just how shocking and jarring it was, it does feel just like that loss felt like a compilation of just a beat down team from what this season's been. And that is not giving them excuses. No, they proved they're not a top 4 team. That's completely fair. And we'll also get to that in a second. But it just felt like a team that every week this year, this is the hard part about being the up-and-comer. It's that it's every week until you prove it is a get-up week. Like Pitt was a get-up week because they hadn't proved anything yet. And Florida was game day. That game seems like nothing now, and we can say it doesn't matter. That was game day. That was a get-up game. LSU was a top 10 matchup. And then obviously Bama, Georgia, Kentucky was still pretty big. Every single week's been a get-up game, and I think you saw a team that was just physically crushed. They were done, and I'm not going to hold that against them, but it is just what it is now. They're not going to the playoff.
Well, I think you look at this Tennessee team. Well, I'll start with South Carolina because this is very similar to what we saw from them last year. Not in the same way, but they had a nightmare showing against A&M.
Yeah.
And then they bounced back and basically start the Dan Mullen is fired train by just rolling Florida. right after their worst performance. Last week, they looked terrible against Florida. Don't really put up a fight. 6 points on the board. And then Florida goes to Vandy and loses.
Yep.
And South Carolina just absolutely sets fire to Tennessee. So, this is why people believe in Shane Beamer, big picture, because you can laugh at the enthusiasm that we've defended him from earlier this year. You can say, well, they 32-point loss to Florida, all those things. But at the end of the day, his teams keep playing. His teams, I believe he is the first South Carolina coach to go to bowl games in his first 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken.
That is wild. Wow.
Yeah. And South Carolina's not the easiest place to win. No. And so you could say, they're no this or that. They've had some bad losses under Beamer, but they've had some really nice wins. None bigger than Saturday. And Shane Beamer was going to take that victory lap, and he absolutely did. So now let's look at the Tennessee aspect of this. So from the SEC's perspective, more than likely, barring an LSU upset, we're going to see Georgia as the only SEC team in the playoff. It was correct. Tennessee has to feel so obviously a crushing loss. And Tennessee was 2 5-foot putts away from, I felt like, probably making the playoff.
Yeah, I think it was higher than 50% odds. Yeah,
it was really. I think it was really close, but you have to kind of zoom out. And when you get to where Tennessee was, where you're so deep in it and you're so close, and you've got the quarterback that's right there in the Heisman hunt, and you're in the playoff hunt, you're right there. I get that this can feel like the walls are closing in and everything's crashing down. 2 things for the Tennessee folks. 1, this was a team that was bucking every trend that we've seen in college football since recruiting eras has existed. They're 19th in 24/7 composite. They're not in the blue chip ratio. The list of teams that have made the playoffs without hitting that Bud Elliott blue chip ratio is very small. I think Washington's one. Cincinnati did it last year. It's a very short list. Nobody's ever won the national championship with it. So I get that fans were dreaming that, but man, that would have been just, again, bucking so much data about this sport. So, I'm not going to say it's fool's gold, but Tennessee was overachieving this year. That's just true. This is a team that Vegas projected to win 7.5 games. Well, they're there. And this is a Tennessee team. I get that it's going to be raw, and you were right there, and you were 2 relatively, I'm not going to say easy wins, because obviously what we saw on Saturday, and we'll get to where Tennessee's going now without Hendon Hooker, which, we have to get to as well. But ultimately, this season is a success no matter what happens. Even if you lose to Vanderbilt, which I don't think they'll do, and I know it's going to be hard to swallow, and you've got a New Year's 6 bowl game on the line, very similar to 2016. But man, you've beaten Alabama for the first time in 2,000 years. You've beaten Florida. You've done some really special things. This
whooped LSU on the road in Tiger Stadium.
I get that it's going to feel bad, but the hay is kind of in the barn on this season. And yes, there were bigger things out there, but I think when the rawness of this loss fades from Tennessee fans, I think they will appreciate what this team has done, where the state of the program is. Let's not forget that Nico Iamaleava exists. Yeah. You've got him coming into town, and if he is the special player that you think he is, well, guess what? Tennessee's probably going to be knocking on this door in time. And you've got an expanded playoff. And if you've got a special quarterback in an expanded playoff, you can make some noise, Brody, late in the season if you're playing right. So I get that it's raw. I get that Tennessee has to be frustrated right now. But I would say this is akin to, hitting a 3-wood from like 230 out and putting it to like 6 feet and then missing it and having it lip out and having to tap in for birdie. I know.
Well done, sir. Your analogy getting fired.
I know you wanted it. I know the great unlikely thing was there. But man, you still had a great year. And there's still some big things out there. So Tennessee fans, don't fret. And I know that it's not great because of how much Tennessee fans hate Shane Beamer, that he's the guy dancing on your grave. But listen, it's just in time, because I think they beat Vandy. I think they go to New Year's Six Bowl. I don't think it really matters what happens in the New Year's Six Bowl in terms of the legacy of this season.
It doesn't.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of Tennessee guys opt out. For one, they don't have a ton of like major draft prospects, but also that game means a lot. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of that. So getting there is huge.
Do you know the last time Tennessee won 10 games in a regular season, like not counting the bowl?
I'm going to guess it was 98 or 2001.
It was 2001. So it has been 21 years. So your analogy's right. Like you have no choice but to step back and just be like, God, now you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but because you would know far better. Tennessee fans for the last 10 years, I mean, all they really want, I mean, obviously they want to get back to being Fulmer power.
Competency.
Sure. But they just want to get back to that 9-3 zone, right? Like if they go 9-3 every year, obviously not long term, but they would be thrilled. That means you're back in the top 15 every year. You are relevant again, and you are about to finish the year a top 10 team. And it's like this is my screwed up brain, and this is the brain of somebody who's only roots for teams that have never won a championship. So bear with me here. But I think if long term, it might be better for them. Okay, obviously you want to go to the playoff. Like I don't know, I'm not framing this right, but like it is better for them to be 10-2 than be like you jump too far too soon. Does that make I don't literally feel that way.
Are you talking about on the back end of all of a sudden Heupel has to equal that every year?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to get to. Of like,
or 3 or 4 years from now, when they're in that 9-3 zone, you fire Josh Heupel and you go higher.
It's like, wait, you were in a playoff and now you're this? Yeah. That sort of I think there's something there sometimes. Like you can jump too fast and then it can mess up the infrastructure that you've been trying to build. And guys, I'm not actually arguing this strongly, but it's just like sometimes in the back of your brain, you got to view it this way because 10-2, 11-2 with a bowl win or whatever, that is a paradigm shifting season. The success is not about this year. The success is about what this year probably, if you do it right, will mean for the next 10 years. And you are now the cool offense in college football. Like, is it fair to say they're number one coolest? And we've talked, you've done a good job talking about like, yeah, recruiting might not be like as much of a pop off because the scheme doesn't necessarily develop NFL. Yes, there's something there, but still, if you're a portal receiver, Tennessee's in the top 3 schools you're looking at. If you're a portal, and then on the other end, Tennessee can now be like, hey, if you're a defensive guy in the portal, a defensive prospect, look, you can be the missing piece, man. You can be the next thing. We need to just get that defense fixed. I do not think Tennessee is going to jump into being in the Bama Georgias in the next 10 years. No. But there is no reason if they keep this steady, they should not be a top 20 team perennially for the next 20 years because that's what Tennessee always should be. And now they've just jumped the shark.
Not to oversimplify it, but I'm about to oversimplify it. You need Nico to be the guy. He's got to be the special guy to keep this going because if you have a playmaker quarterback, man, for one, it takes this offense to another level. But for two, it just gives you a shot. And if you don't have that at quarterback, everything just gets worse. But if you've got that guy, that's why you can play a game like Tennessee did on Saturday. And the whole game, I still felt like, they're still in this. This offense can score so quickly. They'll still be fine. And then it wasn't fine. And then Hendon Hooker went down. And I feel like, there's just not a lot of guys, Brody. I think Cam is the one guy that sort of embodies this, that spends not that much time on a campus. Hendon got there less than 2 years ago. People forget that. Less than 2 years ago. He only played basically a season and a half at Tennessee. And he's going to go down as one of the legends of this program. I've said it, since I started covering Tennessee. I covered them from 18 to 20, so 3 years, the Pruitt era. And the whole time I thought, whoever gets this thing turned around, they're going to be legends. Well, I didn't think it would happen in 21 or 22. Sorry. I didn't think it happened this quick. Sorry. It's been a long week, man. Anyway, I didn't think it happened this soon, but Hendon Hooker's that guy. Who turned this around? Hendon Hooker turned this around. Tyler Barron helped turn this around. Byron Young helped turn this around. Jalen Hyatt helped turn this around. These guys gave them this season that brought as much happiness and as much pride to Tennessee and its program as I think anyone has since '98, Brody. I
Yep.
really think that. And I think the people will rally around Heupel. I think he's got some tough decisions to make with his defensive coaching staff. How much of that is Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator? How much of that blame goes to Willie Martinez in the secondary? I don't know. I think he's got to figure that out. They got to look at the tape and see what was going on. How much of it was scheme? How much of it was technique? What was happening? Because they said after the game they tried everything. Nothing was working. So I don't know. I'm not so sure that I'm going to point to scheme on this. I got to tell you, Brody. I think at some point you got to point to they don't have a lot of dudes in the secondary.
Yeah.
And also Spencer Rattler, good grief, man. Just making
also,
some
isn't it worth
unbelievable
just
throws.
saying like this defense was never great. Like this isn't like something went. Oh man, it got broken. It's like this was always an average defense. That's not an insult. Like they were good enough to win a lot of games, but like it was an average
they're
defense,
above average up front. They're above average up front in the front seven, but the secondary was always a liability.
Yeah, and I mean that as a compliment. Like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this isn't some like, holy crap, what happened, guys? Like, got to fire everyone. It's like, yeah, this defense was rebuilding. It was going to take a bit. They did a really good job this year. And guess what? Week 11, they got fried. And it's just kind of, I don't know. I'm not going to overreact to that. But you're right. They probably do have to make some changes. I'm not like arguing that. But it's just like, let's pump the brakes a little. And our question is, Joe Milton's probably the starter next year, right? Unless Nico just blows everyone away.
I think – so from what I understand, I think that's a big reason why Joe Milton didn't leave. Yeah. Because I think he sees, first of all, a coaching staff that really believes in him. They brought him in. They gave him every opportunity to be the guy. And he just, the accuracy issues poked out last year.
Yep.
And then he is injured, and Hendon Hooker sets fire to, everyone and takes over and has the dream season that he had this year. So we're going to see something out of Joe Milton. I don't think Vandy's going to be the biggest test for him, but
I guess that's true. It's nice that you get a little test case.
Yeah, if they win, then you have a month of Joe Milton taking first team reps, and then you have a month. I say that 12 practices, and then you have, or is it 15?
It doesn't matter. Continue.
Anyway, and then you get a New Year's Six game against probably a really good team. I think if Tennessee had its way, hopefully a team that wants to be there, that isn't just gripped by opt-outs. I will never belabor guys that want to opt out, but it does hurt the bowl games.
It stinks,
If you don't want guys to opt out, pay them or give them incentives to play. If it was me, and it's all situational. Like Ohio State, I get why they didn't want to play, even though it was the Rose Bowl, the guys last year. I totally get that. Florida, they didn't really want to be able to go to the Cotton Bowl a couple of years ago. That was about as bad as I've seen in terms of
that 2020. That was
wide opt. That was pretty bad. Then you had the COVID aspect of that as well. So anyway, I don't expect a lot of opt-outs for Tennessee because they want to cap this season the way that it has been. But we'd be remiss though. You just have to be crushed for Hendon Hooker. That was hard to watch, Brody. I think Hendon. I remember talking to him right when he came to Tennessee, and I asked him, I was like, what do you think if the staff gets fired? Because he committed to the previous staff, and he's like, I'm all in either way. I was like, okay, man, okay, and he did, and I think he is everything right about college football, Brody. He's been through a lot. Obviously, it didn't go well for him at Virginia Tech. He had some really great moments. Had the health issue, almost thought he was going to need open heart surgery. Comes to Tennessee. Gets recruited over. They bring in Joe Milton. They saw them in the spring, all the quarterbacks Tennessee had, and said, we're going to go get Joe Milton. The staff wasn't all in on the Hendon Hooker show. And he kept playing, and he kept working. And he built this. He did this himself. He did this because he kept on working. And I think, I'm not going to rip guys that want to leave and go in the portal and play because you only have a very small amount of time. Hendon made a lot of decisions that don't make a lot of sense when you talk about the portal. You talk about first coming to Tennessee for a staff that was on its way out, and you talk about getting recruited over and sticking around and doing those things. And guess what? It paid off for him. And I think he's a guy that perseverance is really an admirable trait. And I think when all is said and done, on the Hendon Hooker story and Hendon Hooker's legacy at Tennessee, it's not going to be losing at South Carolina. It's not going to be holding his knee in the last time that we're ever going to see him wearing that Tennessee helmet. It's going to be chucking it downfield and it's going to be directing the band and being a program legend. So props to Hendon Hooker, and as bad as Saturday night was, I think in time people will be able to appreciate what Tennessee did with its tap in birdie putt season.
No, you put it well. Like you remember, I as my own fan, like you remember the guy who pushed you in the right direction a lot more than you remember the guy who gets you over the top, right? Like
Yeah.
I will remember the 2018 Sixers more fondly than any other like team, because that was the team that like they were all young and got in the right direction. TJ McConnell, you know, like, and those are the guys you remember, the ones who put you there. Like I know 2018 LSU has like a reverence in LSU because I was the one that got them in the right direction, and I really do believe that. So I think you're right. And what makes the last thing, and then we'll move on, but like what makes it even sadder is the age part. It's like he's gonna be 25 in January, and the one hope he probably would have had in the NFL was just like, this guy's ready, smart, savvy, like this guy can do it. And now your whole first year is in jeopardy. And it's just like, man, that's heartbreaking. That's obvious, but it's just heartbreaking. Now,
yeah,
I can continue.
No, I think his draft stock will be very interesting. I think he was knocking on the door of being a first rounder.
Yeah, like that late first rounder, like the team that's close picks. Yeah,
and NFL teams will have to decide what they want from him. But again, I think a guy that has his head on straight. I always talk about the kindest way to talk about college kids is I usually refer to it as the turd factor. Hendon Hooker has a turd factor of about -1,000.
Yes,
in terms of just maturity, doing the right things, spending the time that it takes to prepare all these things. He acts like a 24 and 25-year-old. He kind of always has.
Yeah.
Even going back to Virginia Tech, he's a mature kid. So I think that will serve him well in football and whenever football is over in life. So a tip of the cap to Hendon Hooker, a guy that extremely fun player to watch. I remember that shootout that he had with Liberty at Virginia Tech. That was a fantastic game. And I thought about that when he came to Tennessee, and I thought, man, he's a fun player. And I never thought he could do the things that he could do. But you know who did think he could do the things that he did, Brody?
Josh Heupel.
No, he didn't. But Hendon Hooker.
No, true. Yeah, okay. I'm like, wait, where are we going with this? You gave it to
Hendon
me.
Hooker did.
Yes,
Hendon Hooker did. And I think, he's got a bit of that Baker Mayfield in him. Not quite as cocky, but certainly headstrong, and says, you know what? I don't
to
care.
be a great quarterback, look at every single one of like the all-timers. There's delusion there. You have to be like Joe Burrow is delusional, like in his confidence, and that's why he's great. Tom Brady is delusional in his confidence, and that's why he's great. And I think there's something to that with the Bakers and the Hendon Hookers of like you have to be delusional to get through all the stuff you're getting through and be that good. Also, last thing, like there's also I'm a firm believer in my theory that if you look at every one of the best quarterbacks other than, I don't know, like Peyton and Elway, like none of them were the 5-star number 1 recruit. They're all guys who had like a weird rocky journey and like had to like grow up and figure stuff out. So man, I would bet on like, Burrow falls in that category. Brady obviously falls in that category. Even Mahomes was like, he wasn't some obvious path, I would bet on Hendon Hooker if I'm like, I'm blanking on a team, but like someone in that Viking zone. I'm not Kirk Cousins playing well. I don't mean that, but like someone in that Viking zone of like, you are good, but you just need like that one extra thing to push you over the top. I would totally take a chance on Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be in a situation where anybody's just trying to build around him, which is probably for the best. It's not a great situation to be. Yeah. Brody, not a week ago, I believe we tossed out the path, which was reasonable, to 3 SEC teams in the playoff.
Yes, we did.
How quickly things can change in a week. You've got some thoughts, Brody, on the status of the SEC.
I don't have these thoughts. I apologize that my prompt made it seem like that. Well, no, actually, I want to just hear.
Let's go there.
Our and of course we're referencing, Vanderbilt beats Florida, which isn't like a shocking upset, but still, it's like no one saw that coming. The Ole Miss just got whooped the way they did, and it's like, wait, was Ole Miss ever good? And we can get to that too. And then obviously what happened in Tennessee. And a lot of people, and I will highlight our beloved colleague, Ari Wasserman, who that man was sculpted out of clay to just make takes happen. I mean, that guy,
so much.
like, it's incredible. I love him. Like, he looks in the mirror and says, what is the wildest thing I can say to get a reaction today? Do it. And by the way, I don't think this is a crazy tweet, but he said, have we stopped to consider that maybe gulp, the SEC isn't that good this year? And then, of course, said, I'm running away from my mentions on this one. And I'm not saying I agree with him, but like it's worth having to step back and have the conversation at least of, okay, we all, I think, agree Georgia's that good. But then all of a sudden, if you want to be like an SEC hating cynic, and I get those people who think everything's SEC biased, I actually get it. And it's like, wait, Tennessee just got worked. Maybe they're not good. Their most impressive wins are like Alabama's the big one. Well, Alabama's officially, we're 11 games in, is just a good, not great team. They're not that great. LSU, even its biggest believers, they're not like a great team. They're a flawed team that's figuring it out. Ole Miss is, I've been saying this all year, a flaw, like a really a great achievement, but not that good of a team. Like massive flaws on that team. Jackson Dart's not that good, and we're keep going down.
The way that team is assembled is like,
yeah,
it feels like a duct tape and twine kind of situation.
Exactly what it is. Yeah. So it's like you keep going down the list. Arkansas, that I will defend, but they're 6-4 at the end of the day, or 6-5. Yeah, like there's just nobody other than Georgia now is actually proving to be that good. And then you have to ask yourself, wait, are any of these wins even that great if any of those teams are good? So I'm not saying I'm there. I'm more of a believer in the mentality that everyone's good. In turn, it's just going to lead to a lot. Actually, I'm pretty sure before the season I predicted, right, the West was going to be everyone goes like 8-4 or something like that. And
we're knocking on the door of that.
Yeah, it's not going to get there because LSU's better than we thought. But still, I think they're all just good. But where are you at with that?
I mean, I think it's definitely a down year in the SEC. I mean, there's no question.
In terms of the top.
Yes. Well, I think fair or unfair, because I spent a lot of my career covering the Big 12, and the biggest.
By the way, the comments are getting going on this one. I love it.
Anyway, the biggest complaint from Big 12 fans, and it's happening this year, Brody. It's happening this year for TCU. People are acting like TCU is out here playing like East Carolina every week, or playing like Lafayette every week. Like, the Big 12 hasn't had an undefeated champion. They've had one since 2009 when Colt McCoy got Texas there. Anyway. So the biggest complaint that Big 12 fans had is when Texas and OU are not great, people just assume the rest of the Big 12 is not very good, when they had some really good teams. Oklahoma State in 11 was really good. Baylor in that like 13 to 15 window was pretty unbelievable. TCU in 14 was really good.
Yeah.
They've had some really good teams, nonetheless. But if they're not Texas and OU, people don't take them seriously. And I think the SEC is somewhat, they're so defined by Alabama and Georgia that you have Georgia, but Georgia has looked mortal a lot this season. I think somebody in the comments, Catherine B, the legendary Catherine B, says Georgia plays down to their opponents. And Seth Emerson has written some really good stuff about that this year, that this team, when they need to answer the bell, they've done it. But this is not a team like last year that just goes and just rips your heart out every single week. They don't do that. This Georgia team is not that team. Obviously, when they've needed to be impressive, they get in the hole at Missouri. They dig themselves out. They absolutely squash Tennessee, hold their offense, like no one has all season long. They've answered the call. I think they'll do that again against LSU in a couple weeks. But they kind of mess around a little bit too. They didn't look great against Kentucky. So that factors into it. The fact that Alabama, how many times we need to see this Alabama team, the Texas game, the Texas A&M game, over and over, this Alabama team they're good, but they don't scare anybody. And they're a couple plays away from, having maybe some more losses, even though their two losses are close losses. So, and then Ole Miss obviously doesn't scare anyone. And at the end of the day, they're 8-3 now. Yeah, that's so it's definitely a down year for the SEC. I don't think you can dispute that, because even though Georgia is the best team in the country, they don't inspire the same amount of fear. I don't think Georgia's walking in there, looking unbeatable. If Georgia lost this year to Ohio State or Michigan, or I don't think USC matches up with them well at all. I don't think TCU does either. But if they lost one of those games,
if Caleb Williams went off, I would not be surprised.
Yeah, would you be floored? No. Like last year, watching Bryce Young tear apart Georgia, I couldn't believe my eyes.
Nope.
I was like, what is happening? Like this did not seem like it was possible. And then it happened. That's not this Georgia team. So yeah, it's clearly a down year in the SEC, I think, just because there's not that, and that second class of teams is still, okay. And, we'll see. I do think, fair or not, people put a lot of emphasis on the bowl season. And if you
It's
go,
the most flawed thing ever.
yeah,
Well,
especially when you
especially
talk
because a
about
lot of the time it's like
opt-outs
the
and all
fourth best
that.
SEC, like the fourth best Big Ten
Yes.
team playing the seventh best SEC team. They're like,
Yes.
see, Purdue beat Mississippi State, and it's like it's not quite
Yeah.
what's happening here, but
So
sure.
if you're the SEC and you go 9-1, like, okay, like that's pretty impressive, and maybe they will, Brody.
Yeah.
Maybe they will.
Well,
But in the season, when I look at these SEC teams, okay, Georgia's obviously the best team. I still think Tennessee is the second best team in the league. LSU, you can't argue with what they've done, but they still, you watch them and you're not like, oh man, you're just like, you watch them and you're like, how is this team 9-2? Like, like what?
It's the same thing as almost. It is impressive, but they are not that good. I think we'd all agree.
Exactly.
On that.
And so Tennessee has looked really impressive, but the talent level is not like,
great point.
On the same level. I mean, this is a team that I think I pointed out to our buddy Ari, Mr. Stars Matter, that South Carolina was a 3-touchdown underdog to Tennessee. But if you look at the 24/7 talent composite, number 19 is Tennessee. Do you know who number 20 is, Brody? I've set you up for this
South
one.
Carolina?
It's South Carolina. The talent gap was not that wide. I think the scheme and all that stuff makes Tennessee a really impressive team. But their roster, in terms of what they've got, is not that different from South Carolina.
Yeah.
So
it's been kind of a rough year for the Stars Matter a little bit in terms of Bama being down. Like, Ohio State's undefeated, but I think we all agree Ohio State's just like, there's some real questions there. Like, it does feel like the gap is shrinking a little bit, but I'm not actually getting there. But no, and I'm going to ask you this directly, like before I get to my point, and it's something my neurotic brain wrestles with every single day of my life, watching football. But like, do you place more value on how many teams are playoff good in a conference or how many teams are good? Like, I think I'll ask you that quickly and directly.
So it's always been interesting because I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this over the weekend, but this came up in Big 12 country a lot because I always felt like the Big 12 had a little bit more depth in some years than the SEC did. The SEC would always have like the one or two elite teams, and then have that second class of teams that would get stuck in the Citrus Bowl and win by like 30 over like Wisconsin or something. Like that would always seem to happen. And maybe that happens this year, but I look at it in a holistic way. I think what does the bottom of your league look like? Or do you have 3 easy wins in a 14-team league? That matters to me. What does the top of your league look like? Do you have that playoff contender? I think that matters. What does your second class look like? What does your middle class look like? Your average teams. Do they have some dudes? Do they have units or players that scare you? And I think, I don't think this is anything big picture with the SEC. I mean, when you have as much talent and you look at the recruiting rankings, I think, next year it's 1 year. I don't think this is a referendum on anything big picture in the SEC, but it's a down year this year. And that's ironically, I still think I might still point to the SEC still as the best league, but it's still not great.
But that's what I was trying to get to with that question. It's like, and I'm overall with you. I think I'm struggling with. I think, and I'm not. You don't disagree with me, but I think the SEC, that middle down, is awesome. I actually love it. I just don't love how good the second best team is this year. But I look at it, it's like Matthew C. pointed out, Arkansas is ravaged by injury and all that. Like, Arkansas is the best example for me on my brain of like Arkansas 6-5, but Arkansas is the 6th hardest schedule in college football by SP Plus and all that. And even more than that, as you and I get into a lot, it's one thing to play like 4 huge games. I think it's harder to play 9, like 10 tough-ish games. That's so much harder to me. And like Arkansas, I feel kind of confident that if Arkansas went up against Iowa, I think Arkansas will be a 4 or 5 point favorite. And I think that's a good example because Iowa is probably the 3rd best team in the Big Ten right now. Like we're fourth. And it's like that. I think the middle is very good. LSU is good. Ole Miss is flawed but good. Vanderbilt is now actually just very confident. South Carolina is good now. Like, they are a well-rounded team. And those are two examples that have been bottom 3 the last like 5-10 years. So I tend to view it a bit more as I think if I'm going through every conference in America right now, I still think I'm picking the SEC as a whole. And I don't think anyone's wrong for questioning this or telling me I'm wrong. Because, by the way, I think the Pac-12 is really good this year. This has been like one of my favorite college football seasons in a long time, because it feels like, other than the Big Ten probably, it's a lot of depth across football. Like Big 12, to our point, we love 8 teams in the Big 12. Like, we love watching, I don't know, like Baylor. Like, Baylor's 6-5, but Baylor's good. The Pac-12, Washington State is good. They're not in the mix for anything. Like, I love this college football season. But
here's what I think is fueling some of this, and I think it's fair, is when you look at everyone in the SEC. Okay, have you gotten smacked by a non-playoff team? And there's a lot of teams that have. I'm just going down. Tennessee, everyone smacked. They got smacked by a non-playoff team. South Carolina, they've gotten smacked by a non-playoff team. Kentucky, 38-point loss. Florida does not have that ugly loss. Missouri and Vanderbilt obviously do. LSU, really bad loss to Tennessee.
Yeah.
So, Bama doesn't have a bad loss. Ole Miss had theirs on Saturday.
That's a really
Mississippi
good point.
State got punked by a pretty average Bama team. Arkansas has had some bad loss. They lost to Liberty. Auburn, Texas A&M, we don't even need to get into. So I think when you look down,
everyone's looked bad enough. Like,
everyone's had
really
a week
bad.
or two where you're like, woof, what is this team? And I don't think that happens every year. And I think that is what fuels a lot of this. And I don't think it's wrong, because we don't see that all the time. I think that's not a metric of, I don't think if you looked up the advanced numbers, there's a, did you get smacked by a non-playoff team column with just a Y or an N?
Yes.
But it's something worth looking at.
No, that's a really, really good observation, honestly, that like everyone, because really we're talking about casual viewers when we're really talking about this, and like every casual viewer has seen every team look like crap at least once. So I think that's even Georgia has looked like crap in a way, even though they don't lose. I want to ask you a question, because we haven't even, and we can make it quick if you want, but I want to ask, because I want to get to like the Vanderbilt South Carolinaism of this week. And both those programs have gone from laughing stocks to just genuine competence now. And I want to ask you, what do you think those teams can be? Like, as much as they're awesome stories right now and we love it, what can they get to in your mind? Because they're both in the East, which makes it a little trickier. And Tennessee's on the line.
So Matthew C. actually set us up for our next segment. Florida doesn't have an ugly loss, isn't losing to Vandy, regardless of the point spread, an ugly loss. Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's a good question.
So we hit on South Carolina. I think the thing with South Carolina is they don't have a unit that is elite or scares you.
You take that back.
Yeah, exactly.
Special teams, sir. Number 1 in the country.
Beamer ball. Fair point.
Yes,
fair
you're
point.
obviously right.
Kai Kroger, Heisman candidate. Anyway, they don't have a unit that scares you. They have really good receivers. I like Josh Vann. I think Juice Wells had a really nice night. Spencer Rattler, obviously when he's on, he looked really good on Saturday. So that's part of it. I think South Carolina, as currently constructed, is pretty close to its ceiling in 2022. You got to recruit a little bit better, and maybe a win against Tennessee at home like that can help you do that. Vandy, and I think for Vandy and South Carolina actually both kind of have very similar things that they need to show us next. And that is, can you be more consistent? Can you eliminate the like cringe losses? Okay. Because I remember reading our colleague Pete Sampson's story behind the scenes embedded with Vanderbilt for their loss of East Tennessee State. And I remember reading that and thinking, when he's having them restart stretching and warm-ups and all that stuff, I'm sitting there going, is this guy going to make it out of year one? Like, I don't like what I'm hearing here. And now you're sitting here, not even to the end of year 2, and you've got pretty compelling proof of concept.
Yes.
Okay. You beat Kentucky. You beat Florida. I'm not even sure which one of those is more impressive. They're both pretty impressive for Vanderbilt. And now you're playing a game against Tennessee, without Hendon Hooker, where you could get to a bowl game, Brody. We're talking about bowling Vandy. We got a shot here to do that. Now, it's not fair to expect Vandy to compete against playoff caliber teams or great teams, but 55-3, 55-0 to Alabama and Georgia this year. That's the kind of stuff that, I'd have to go back and look. But when they had Kyle
I don't
Sherman
care about those losses.
Well, but you can't get punked like that. That's the thing.
Okay.
Where you can't just be a walkover. Okay. Like that, you have to show some fight in when you're playing the best teams in the league to really make people take you seriously. And they have not done that under Clark Lee. They have been competent. They were playing hard in the second half of last year. But if you want to know what the next step is, it's avoiding those kinds of losses where you're just like, do you guys even belong in the same conference? That's what you have to do. And then if you're South Carolina, same thing. The losses aren't as bad, but 38-6 to Florida, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Especially seeing what we saw from them at 48-7 to Georgia. You can't do that stuff. If you want us to really take you seriously as like, this team is legit.
Now, no, and overall agree with you. I think what's going to be interesting, Matthew C, I think kind of nailed it actually. The question is, what can these teams be? Vanderbilt's ceiling is probably like, I don't agree with ceiling. He says bowl eligibility. Probably not ceiling because we've seen James Franklin.
Ask James Franklin.
Yeah, but still, you are right. Like your goal needs to be hanging around 6 wins, and you are succeeding. And in South Carolina's ceiling is probably what Stoops is doing in Kentucky. I completely agree with that. And by the way, do you want to know, just to paint the picture of Vanderbilt football, I just Googled Vanderbilt commits, just to get, and the first thing that came up was Perfect Games baseball commits for Vanderbilt. And I think that there's no other program in
well,
college
I've
football.
always said, if you want to know if you're a basketball school or a football school, type in your school's name in ESPN.
Indiana's
press
basketball.
Enter.
Yep.
And whatever one comes up first, that's the school.
But that's got to be the only one that's baseball first. That is a new level.
Probably.
But
shout out to the Vandy boys, but yes.
But I think I'm more impressed by them because you're saying the getting punked thing, and you're probably right. But I'm more impressed by it because I know they're losing that game every year. Like that's not even a question to me.
Yeah, but you gotta do something. You can't it can't be 55-0. You can't look like you're Austin P out here.
I guess, but you're losing that game anyway. Like, what does it matter? Like your goal is to win.
I think it matters to fans. I think you don't want to be bracing for impact when you play Georgia and Bama. You want to say, hey, if everything falls right, we win the turnover battle. We can be in this game late, maybe.
I guess.
And if those teams play well, then they beat you, and that is what it is. But you don't want to go in there just sort of feeling like,
I guess, but I say this as somebody who went to IU and at times in my life would have considered myself an IU football fan, which is a similar comp to this. It's like, I don't care about the Ohio State loss or how bad they lose every year. Like I could care less. I care about how they hold up against Michigan State, how they hold up against, obviously Purdue. Like that's my metric because Ohio State's just a game that doesn't even matter. But anyway, I think what makes these two so interesting and why I wanted to talk about this before we move on is they're both teams, though. One, you're right. The proof of concept thing is now real. But Shane Beamer, the path was he was a good recruiter, right? Like he'd be able to, if he can stay alive, maybe do something really cool. And that's what's so jarring is I don't think in any of our brains thinking what Shane Beamer could do at South Carolina, we're thinking he'd get them overachieving right away. That's what's wait, I wonder really what could be happening here because we were thinking about year 4, year 5. And it's if you're actually maybe getting to 7-8 wins in year 2, making a bowl in year 1, which shocked all of us. It's wait, 1, that's showing you might have more chops than we realize. But 2, what does that do for your recruiting? They're 15th right now nationally in 2023 class. They got some, and I like how, not that I don't think there's a right or wrong way to recruit, but I like that it's not any they got that one top 50 kid from South Carolina. It's a lot of 100 to 250 guys. I like that. That's telling me a bit more about
and that. I think we're glossing over that second class, the SEC, you can really do some work in the portal.
Yes.
Because if you're missing a spot. I mean that's where South Carolina, Juice Wells, Christian Bill Smith, a kid named Spencer Rattler, Austin Stogner. These guys
are going to win a lot of those guys. Yeah.
Yes. Beamer is a compelling guy. And I think, again, we've talked about proof of concept of Vandy. What more do you need to see at South Carolina? I think
Yeah.
there is value, real value, especially in 2022 as the sport changes. Yes, there's the sort of the unstoppable machine and the sort of robotic Alabamas and all those things. But there's value in having fun. Tennessee this year was having fun. They didn't have a lot of fun on Saturday, but in general, they're having a lot of fun. Yeah. South Carolina, Shane Beamer seems like he's having fun. It seems like I would like to be a part of that program. It seems like it's fun there, right?
I had an observation.
And that values.
Because one, they own social media again after that win, right? Like,
golly, I didn't really listen. I have a lot of Tennessee fans who follow me. I didn't really want a deluge of angry Tennessee fans that were in their feelings on Saturday night. But the South Carolina Rocky Top tweet was incredible.
It was incredible. And then like 30 minutes later, they did the meme that's been going around all week of the guy showing a girl his Costco card at a basketball game. And they did that with I forget what it said, but it was like Vanderbilt or South Carolina beats Tennessee or something. And I'm like, is there a higher upside job in the field of social media manager than getting the call up to be Shane Beamer's social media manager? Because
I didn't know where they were going with the Rocky Top. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when the sandstorm hit, I'm telling you, Brody, I literally laughed out loud.
I gasped. Yeah, I'm like, you dog. But I just got to imagine, is there another coach? Because even Lane Kiffin gets credit for social media, but he's not like, let's talk with the social media team. No, he's just on his own phone messing around. Shane Beamer, I would love to know, is the social media man, are they having a 1 hour meeting every day about just here's the note we're going to hit on this topic. Here's how sassy we're going to get if we beat this. That job has to be the best job in social media in sports, because your coach is going to give you the ammunition. It's going to give you the quality of content. And he's going to give you the green light. Just shoot, baby. Shoot those threes. So I'm all in on that. Just that's all I had to say. Also,
Catherine B notes that Clark Lee hired the head of scouting for 24/7 to be his roster. I don't know Barton well, but that is Barton Simmons. I think I met him once, but I didn't know Barton very well. He worked for 24/7 for a long time. I was sad, Brody, that I did not get to write about the SEC this week. I was in Charlottesville all last week, and I would encourage you guys to check out that story. I sort of chronicled the week that was at UVA. So I spent all yesterday kind of getting that story in place. But this was a rough week to not write about the SEC. We almost had a football and crab cakes show, Brody, but we'll keep it. We'll keep it SEC.
I was going to end the show, by the way, shouting out your fantastic story on that heartbreaking weekend in Virginia, and even we weren't going to talk about it because it's an SEC show, but I do recommend our listeners all go read that. So, but great.
Yeah, it's been that was an impactful week, and being at that memorial and being around there, being around Charlottesville all week is not something that I will probably forget the rest of my life. I was not familiar very much with Virginia. I'd never been to Charlottesville before last week. And I just encourage you guys to read that story. It was a privilege to be able to tell it. And I appreciate the people that spoke with me for it in a really, really difficult week. Thanks for taking that on. Thanks, Brody, as well. So,
of course,
Brody, we gotta look forward.
This is my favorite week of the year. I want you to know that.
It is really fun. Rivalry week. I don't care.
I don't care about the turkey. I don't care about the sides.
I care about Thanksgiving.
I could care less. I care about Thursday because I love the Egg Bowl. The Egg Bowl is my favorite event. Wow. I think Masters is number one, but I think maybe opening weekend college basketball tournament's up there. But the Egg Bowl is my favorite sporting event.
I'm just envisioning Brody passing on the entire Thanksgiving spread and just housing boiled eggs all day to prepare himself.
I'm trying to think of a Mississippi food too, just fried catfish, I guess. I don't know. But
probably catfish.
Yeah. Okay. I spent 1 year at the Clarion Ledger. I think that's where I really fell in love with it. I was basically the GA, I basically just was the second guy on both State and Ole Miss that season for the but in that year was, I believe, the DK Metcalf P year, which the people give Elijah Moore all the love, but DK Metcalf
started
so he could fly, and I'll always remember it. I won't name because he does that, and I just remember a beloved Ole Miss Homer reporter just screaming, "You idiots!" Which also tells you a lot about, I think, the Egg Bowl rivalry is the media element too. Man. There's a lot of fans in that rivalry as well, but I love this rivalry, and it's I'm trying to think. Obviously, the year where they were both top 10 and all that's the best one ever, and 2020 is a legendary one or 19 is a legendary one for the firings and the implications of the P. But I can't think of many like this where they're both just pretty good teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like one team's good, the other one wants to ruin their life, or they're both bad, and then the other one like who's going to be less bad. And this one's like 7-4 and 8-3, like two good teams. Got two sassy coaches and Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin. Like I don't know, it's kind of less dramatic than most years, but it's going to be a good one. And I hope.
And this is where like people want to talk about the playoff is all that matters, and if it's not a playoff game, people don't care. People are going to care not only about the Egg Bowl, which is a great game, very fun game. I will be watching that rather than I don't know what the NFL game is at night. I kind of have the NFL on just kind of in general during the day during Thanksgiving, usually depending on where I'm at. My in-laws not huge football people in general, but I think we're hosting this year. I don't actually know. Anyway, I should know that. It's Monday. It's been Brody again. It's been a long week. I've been out of it. Anyway, the Egg Bowl will be great. I'm gonna definitely be watching that over the.
So,
NFL
what's your next
Saturday
one
night.
that you're most excited about of Thanksgiving?
Well, so Brody, let's run these down real quick.
Yeah.
Because, I have to say, I believe this is a solid verbal, of records, throwing the records out, and it is a very funny, consistent bit on the show.
Yes.
But we got to run down these rivalries real quick, and you tell me, Brody, are we throwing the records out, or are we keeping the records and holding them close to our heart and saying no, this team stinks? Okay.
Yeah. All right. I'm here for it.
All right. So the Egg Bowl is a toss-up. I think we can hold the records closer to two good teams, and that's the first game.
Fair.
But let's go down. I am not going to acknowledge the Battle Line Trophy as a rivalry because Mizzou and Arkansas. As someone who
you would know.
went to Mizzou and grew up in Arkansas, I can tell you confidently those schools do not care about each other. Arkansas
it's my favorite thing in sports.
Arkansas
is the rivalries that like they try to make a thing. Yeah.
They try to make LSU and but listen, Arkansas hates Texas, and Mizzou hates Kansas, and those are the only schools that those two schools truly hate.
Yes.
So I will not recognize the Battle Line Trophy as a rivalry. We're going to skip that. Florida and Florida State. Are we throwing the records out?
I think I'm throwing them out. I think
I'm with you. I'm throwing them out.
Because Florida's not good, but like Florida's competent in a weird way. Like Billy Napier knows what he's doing. They know how to like kind of like man it. Like Florida State's just better than them, but Florida State doesn't have like a real street cred yet, and they haven't like when like the flat like it's on them. They haven't really proven it that much. So
Florida State hasn't had that moment that just makes people laugh. They've had one or two every single year for like 6 years, and they're just kind of coasting. They haven't really had the moment that makes people take them seriously.
Yes.
But then you look up and they're ranked, and you're like,
dead on. Yeah.
Hey, Florida State, what's up?
That's a great recipe for a throw the records out game.
I'm gonna buy low on Florida. I think we're gonna get a Anthony Richardson explosion game here.
Ooh, okay.
I'm throwing the records out, Brody.
Throw them out.
I'm giving it. I'm getting it. We're going on to Saturday. Georgia and Georgia Tech. I am gonna look at those records and I am gonna stash them away, put them in a safe. Those records are not going anywhere. This is gonna be an absolute demolition.
But Georgia Tech's been like the sneaky mess everyone up team this year.
Don't care.
And Georgia's played down on their competition all year.
Don't care. I don't know what happened in North Carolina on Saturday. Bro, I was watching games in Charlottesville on Saturday night, Brody. I cannot tell you how disorienting it is to walk into a sports bar and see only ACC football on the screen. That's not a thing.
That is not an experience that I've had. I'm going to open an ACC themed sports bar in New Orleans and just see what happens. Like,
that is not an experience that I have had before.
Boston College, Duke, let's go.
Like, it was wild. So anyway, fortunately, I got them to change it in time. But so I actually watched more of Georgia Tech, North Carolina than I care to admit. Yeah. I don't know what happened to North Carolina. They were up 17-0, and then I kind of tuned out because Georgia Tech's not very good. And then all of a sudden, North Carolina was losing, and I wasn't really paying attention. So shout out to, you thought Tennessee had a bad day. North Carolina was at an outside shot at the playoff, but Drake May was in position to basically, if you beat Clemson, he was going to win the Heisman. I thought he was going to win it over C.J. Stroud, honestly, because his numbers are better.
I was getting that.
But not happening. So sorry for Mac. And I am.
He'll still be a first round pick.
I think that tells me more about North Carolina than does Georgia Tech. So I'm out.
Fine.
Brody,
I'll throw him out.
Do we believe
I'll keep him.
Spicy South Carolina?
Yes, absolutely. Like so does that, because they're both not, wait, I need to ask you this. This is important. Is saying I think South Carolina can win this, is that throwing them out or is that keeping them? Because they're both like kind of close this year.
So here's the problem. I feel like we're turning the page to a read your press clippings week for South Carolina. And I can't believe I'm saying this, Brody.
They're overrated.
I'm gonna whisper this. I think Clemson's underrated.
Yeah.
I think people are not respecting Clemson, who has just like they've been kind of back to wrecking shop like a lot this year, but they still have, they aren't quite the same dominant Clemson that we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So I think people don't recognize like they have been really, really good for pretty much the whole season, except for the Notre Dame game. So I actually think Clemson flexes a little bit here. I think we get a read your press clippings week from South Carolina. I'm gonna go sell high on the Gamecocks coming into this ball game.
That's a good take, and I'm here for it. But I'm gonna say, because I think you're right. I think Clemson is like, because we didn't think they were playoff good, then we forgot they're still very good. But what Clemson's flawed. They're not gonna like whoop them 52-7. Like that's just not what they're built to do.
Not in that way, but I think they can whoop them like
41, but here's my thing. What does South Carolina do?
17.
South Carolina managed, like, by no metric is South Carolina a very good football. Like their defense, I want to write like a 10,000 word essay on South Carolina's defense.
I'm not reading that if you write that, just for the record.
Yes, you are. You're editing it worse. Like every defensive metric, they're like 120, like they're so bad in like allowing success. But they're 7-4, and they like their defense isn't even that bad at like the scoring and all that. I don't understand it, but they have an ability to just manage games, right? Special teams, all that, to just make games ugly, contort it to your own terms. It's like we talk about with Kentucky all the time. I'm gonna throw out the records. I'm gonna throw them out.
Louisville, Kentucky, I think is just gonna be a good game. I think higher scoring than people think. Here's my pick of the week, Brody.
Give it to me.
I'm throwing the records out in the Iron Bowl. I'm believing in Caddy against my better judgment.
Yeah,
I think
I'm throwing him out.
Auburn is more talented than people realize. This team is playing unbelievably hard for Caddy. I don't think Auburn wins this game, but I think they put a scare to Bama, and Bama's not exactly killing people right now. It's in Tuscaloosa. If it was in Auburn, I'd take Auburn to win as like a 14-point underdog. I really would.
I know. We talked this last week. It's the biggest bummer of all time. That would have, God, if that
I was wondering if we get a come to earth week. This week against Western Kentucky, who's a pretty competent team, and instead Auburn looked really good. So I'm buying Caddy. I think they play Alabama close. I'm throwing the records out. I would not be floored if Auburn wins that game. I don't think they will, but if they do, Brody, I'm gonna stare you straight in the face next week. I'm gonna say, this is me not being surprised that they lost.
That's a good face. This is why people need to watch live.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm throwing him out. Now, our next one is maybe the toughest one. It's like the most like, how do you wire your brain pick of whether we're considering these records thrown out or not? Because it's like, are you like Texas A&M, man? Like these teams actually have become to hate each other. This was a forced rivalry 5 years ago, and now it's a real rivalry. Which
I'm selling whatever Texas A&M's.
I know. I don't know what to do.
The talent's there. The player investment is not there.
But you have a throw out. Okay, but here's my thing. I'm worried. I'm keeping the records. I'm going to say that.
No.
Records have been kept.
This is an LSU blowout, big time.
Here's the thing. It's close. Like this has become a throw out the record game every year because like last 2020 A&M was a near playoff team, and that was like a 10-7 game. Last year LSU was a disaster, and they won on the final play of the game and like a wild, like this is a throw out the record game. And you rule like there is the whole, I know it's annoying, but hey, A&M's talented thing. I don't know.
Nope.
I'm keeping the records.
I'm going right after this show. I'm writing down all of the records from LSU and A&M, and I'm going to go put them in my attic, and I will not throw them out. I'm keeping them, Brody.
Catherine points out A&M has won this game twice. That is a fair note. In 18, someone argued didn't really win it. And
I'm a Tennessee Vandy, Brody. The Joe Milton experiment makes me nervous because he's never had a receiver that he can't overthrow. The arm talent is unbelievable, and he makes some crazy throws. But we saw some of that again when he came in for Hooker on Saturday. But, Brody, at the end of the day, these teams didn't just play last week. They've played 11 games. I'm buying low on Tennessee in this game. I'm holding the records. I'm saying Tennessee flexes here. Tennessee.
Oh
flexes.
my God, no. Oh,
Yes.
You're so wrong. I'm not throwing these records out. I am putting them in a shredder and then taking them out to the curb. There's no records in this game. This is not an insult to Tennessee, but they are fried. They are done. They are cooked.
I'm back in.
Vanderbilt has that ability to get like big plays. I love that scheme. Love Mike Wright. They just kind of like have some athletes in space. Tennessee's defense, has moments where they're not so great at allowing that. Yeah, let's have some fun, man. The records are officially shredded. That game could get fun.
No, Tennessee, and also people forget when Tennessee plays in Nashville, that is not a road game for them most of the time.
No,
they're going to take over the stadium.
Vandy fans, you don't.
I don't
They're
think
buying
so.
in.
So yes, Brody, what was your pick of the week?
I could have made a good joke that they could fill the stadium with all their baseball commits, but that's very inside baseball for those who know the scholarship.
Literally, yes.
But my pick of the week. I can't believe I'm saying this. I've faded Ole Miss every single week this season, and I've been on Mississippi State every single week this season. But I'm taking Ole Miss -3. I like it.
Well, I'm going to go Auburn with the 21.5 points. The way the picks have gone this year, congratulations to Alabama for its blowout victory in the Iron Bowl ahead of time. But I'm taking Auburn plus 21.5. Brody, it's been quite a week of football. Truly at any given Saturday type of week.
It worked out beautifully, man. Next week's going to be like all about Georgia LSU, and we'll dive into it. But this week gave us just some nonsense to have fun.
I feel like we need just as much fake urination as possible this week. That's all I'm asking for at a My Rivalry week. So if we can get, 5-6 guys pretending to pee after scoring, that's a good week. That's a good.
Do you want to stick with peeing, or are there other things we could do, like a fake puke, a fake?
I feel like Randy Moss has covered the other side, so a fake puke maybe.
Like a gallbladder thing. Like, I don't know. Like, how creative can we get? Yeah.
Let's find out. Listen, the possibilities are endless. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in. We got to let Brody go talk to Brian Kelly. So thank you guys. We'll see you next week. For Brody Miller, I'm David Ubben. This has been Football and Grits. Not football and salmon, not football and mash, but football and grits. Thank you guys for listening. See you again next week.